So I should start by saying I don't know anything about product, very, very little. Luckily, I do know a fair bit about experimentation. I've been working or running an agency called conversion.com that I started best part of 10 years ago now. And experimentation is at the core of what we do. So as you can probably guess from the name conversion.com, we're a conversion optimization agency. And that means we pretty much only do two things. We understand why our clients' visitors aren't converting, and then we create and run experiments to try and fix that. And we monitor what happens to user behavior. And we get to work with companies like The Guardian and Facebook to help them better understand their users and to apply those insights through testing and then understanding what happens to that user behavior. So experimentation is kind of key to what we do, both in terms of driving growth, but also in terms of understanding users, getting a deeper insight into them. So what I want to do today is to share 5 quick insights that we've had into experimentation and how it starts to overlap with product. Because what we found is that experimentation for us is no longer about optimizing just landing pages, sign-up flows, checkout forms, e-commerce sites, things like that. It's also spanning into other areas. So we're being asked to look at what is the right price that we should charge for our product? How can we optimize lifetime value? What functionality should we add to our product? How can we solve a particular problem that the company is facing? So the first point to share, and I'll start with a quick example, is on actionable data. So we find that the data that we get from experimentation, from testing, is just as valid, if not potentially more so, than other research methods. So I'll give you a quick example. We work with a software as a service company in Boston, and they're a pretty typical SaaS company in that they have a landing page, a free trial. 2 to 4 weeks later, they'll prompt people to sign up for a paid version of their software. So they're pretty much a typical SaaS company. And that applies across the website as well. So we've done a bunch of testing with them on the landing page and the pricing page, but there was one problem that we found, which is that visitors to their website weren't sure which particular plan to choose from. And their pricing page was a pretty typical one. It wasn't Salesforce, but it looked kind of like this, where you start with the cheap plans on the left, the expensive plans on the right, and the more you pay, the more functionality you get. And so this is what our client's pricing page looked like. Again, the same thing. You've got the cheap, if not free, plan on the left-hand side. The more you pay, the more functionality you get. The problem with this is that before someone has signed up for and has used the product, they don't know which plan to get. They don't know what the functionality is necessarily. So it meant that there was a blocker at this stage before someone has even signed up because they don't know what to choose. So we were talking with them and we wanted to test an alternative model, something that's a little bit different to how most SaaS companies work. And that is a model that looks a little bit more like this. Whereas you can see from this middle row, you get every feature in every plan. So instead of pricing based on functionality within the product, we're pricing based on the usage, how much someone uses a product. And the good thing about experimentation is that it's kind of difficult to get insight into this through any other research method. Because if you ask someone in a survey or in a focus group, for example, about something like pricing and would they purchase if ... As soon as that person then starts to rationalize and vocalize their response to pricing, it makes, for us, that data a little bit less valid. So we ran this as a split test, and we found that this version more than doubled the revenue from new customers. And the good thing is that we didn't actually have to make any technical changes to the product to be able to test this, because it was already baked into how they ran their free trial anyway. So all we had to do was change the front end. So it made it a very simple change for us to test and then monitor. So the good thing is, unlike other research methods, people going to this experiment didn't even know that they were in an experiment. They were simply voting with their mouse in terms of which version they preferred, voting with their wallets even. So what we find is that experimentation can give us data that we can't get anywhere else. And second to that, we also find that the data that we get, the insight that we get from experimentation, can often be much faster than we can get it through other sources too. Let me give you another example. We work with a company in Switzerland called Scout24, who offer a number of marketplace websites. One of them is this one, ImmoScout24. It is not the most beautiful looking website, I'll be the first to say. They're a real estate website, so similar to Rightmove and Zoopla and companies like that. But there's one big difference between them and Rightmove and Zoopla, which is you will type in your search, so an apartment in Zurich, and you'll see the results page. But then one of the big differences, does this? It does. You can see the options here. You can see a list view and you can see a gallery view. But most importantly, there is no option to see a map view, which to us is kind of standard functionality for something like this. It's kind of useful to know where these properties are. And we weren't really too sure why this was the case. Did Swiss people have an aversion to maps? We don't too sure what was causing it. And so we asked the client, and they said, well, actually, this has come up again and again and again, and adding the map view functionality has always been on our roadmap, but we've just never got around to building it. It was never high enough priority. So the advantage that testing gives you means that you can actually build and run minimum viable products, essentially, within a testing framework far faster than you can do if you're to build it normally. Because Optimizely and VWO and most testing platforms like that operate through JavaScript, which means that they run client-side rather than server-side. So you don't actually have to mess around with the back-end system. You can modify it purely in the front end, which makes it far faster to deploy. So we then built this version that you can see here on the right-hand side with the map view. We built it inside of Optimizely. It took us about 2 days to do, compared to our client who would have taken, I think their estimate was about 4 weeks to build it. So it took us two days to build, and then we could actually test it and see whether it's worth them spending the time to integrate it. And as it turned out, it didn't actually make a difference to the conversion rate. So this had very little impact on user behavior. We tested, I think, about half a dozen different variations of this, and it turns out Swiss people don't actually like maps after all. So we find that experimentation, not only can it give us very valid data on user behavior, but it can also give us that kind of data far faster than we can get it through other methods as well. And obviously we're running this not as a prototype that we show to half a dozen people in the lab, we're doing it to our entire audience. And I think that idea of the minimum viable test is hugely important to how we see experimentation and product overlapping. Let me give you another example of this from a client of ours. So we've done a few projects with The Guardian. And as I'm sure you all know, The Guardian is, with every day, becoming less of a newspaper and more of a digital media organization. And at the heart of that, they've got two primary platforms, one being the website, the other being the app. And one thing that's a little bit unique, or that was surprising to us on day one working with The Guardian, is the fact that these two products operate relatively separately. So functionality that exists on the app won't exist on the website and vice versa. And this screenshot you can probably see was taken yesterday. And here's one piece of functionality that doesn't exist on web, which is this little bookmark icon, which allows you to save an article for later. So go back 2 years, that functionality existed on app, but not on desktop. And so there was, I think there we go, in case you missed it. That functionality existed on the app, but not on the website. And so there was this internal desire, should we have parity between the two platforms? Should we add that save for later functionality? And the risk was, again, this was a non-trivial build. It would take, I think the estimate, if I remember rightly, was about close to 4 weeks to design, build, and roll this out on web. And so there was this, essentially a choice that The Guardian had. Option one is they spend the 4 weeks building it. They get the parity between the two platforms. But option two was a little bit more interesting. Applying the same principle of minimum viable product, you can have a minimum viable test. You can just add a, sorry for the crappy contrast, save for later button to the website and just see if people click on it. Maybe saving for later is something that only people on a mobile app do when they don't have time to read an article, but web typically might be a more in-depth experience. Maybe it's not important enough to build on web. And so what we find is that running an experiment like this would be an interesting way to determine how to apply the resource that you have. Because obviously we have a limited amount of resource to develop our product, and it's important that we apply that in a logical way. So we see success as a result of the choices that we make. And that success applies to the success of our company, of our product, and of us as individuals. It's down to the choices that we make. And if we're running experiments, especially if we're using this principle of a minimum viable test, then we can get a kind of clue as to what the answer will be before we actually commit to it fully. Have I been on stage for 20 minutes already? Okay. I was going to say I was racing through this, but I can slow down for the last 5 slides. There's one final example that I'm really keen to share, which is in terms of testing physical products. And it takes that same idea that we saw at The Guardian, but applies it to the physical world. And I should start by saying that this next company is not a client of ours. But it's such a good example that I wanted to share it anyway, and I hope they don't mind me sticking it up on here. So the company is, suspense, Lost My Name, who are based just down the road in Bethnal Green. So Lost My Name, if you are a parent, you will no doubt be familiar with them. They produce beautifully designed, highly personalized children's books. And behind each of these books, there's a kind of hugely complex, logistically complex organization, because these books are, not only are they printed on expensive paper, not only are they personalized, but they're also printed and delivered from multiple centers across the world. Thank you. So that means that every time that they make a change to their product, they have to then roll that out across the board. And there was one particular example that they tested on their website. So this is a popular upsell when you're going through the ordering process at Lost My Name. These books are typically given, are often given as gifts, and so the gift wrap that you can buy on the website is quite an easy way for them to increase the average order value to add a little bit more margin into the purchase. But the thing is, going back to last year, they only had one type of gift wraps available, which is this one, the little monkey gift wrap with the cheeky tongue fastener. My favorite type of fastener. So the question that they faced was, well, if we're doing pretty well out of the upsells for gift wrap, are we missing a trick by only having one type of gift wrap available? What if someone is buying for a child who is not a cheeky monkey? Maybe we need a little shit gift wrap instead. And so they came up with I guess the term would be a more neutral type of gift wrap, which is this one, the confetti gift wrap. Same price, completely different design. Again, you can probably guess where this is going, because the challenge that they face is, do we roll out this product across all of our distribution centers, then add it to the website, and then see whether this product is even worth building in the first place, whether it's going to be popular. So you can kind of guess where this is going. They tested it. And the same as with the Guardian example, instead of actually being able to offer this confetti gift wrap, they merely, they literally offered it without being able to fulfill it. So if people chose the confetti gift wrap, they'd be shown a message saying, sorry, this isn't available at the moment, but you can still get our monkey gift wrap instead. So that way they were able to kind of pre-test the demand for that product before actually launching it to the public. And I think this is obviously a very simple concept on what is merely an upsell to the main product. But I think it's an interesting concept that experimentation gives us the opportunity to pre-test demand for functionality, for additional products. And when you extrapolate this further, the potential is huge, I think. Because for Lost My Name, this didn't actually work. So if you go to their website today, I haven't, so it might be worth checking, but they don't offer this. So the confetti gift wrap was a failure. But the thing is, it only cost them the time it took to build and run this test. And what I appreciate is that, especially in a session where we're talking about the importance of the user, this is a pretty crappy user experience for the people who chose the confetti gift wrap. But what I think is more important is that Lost My Name are applying their resources effectively. They're determining what their users care about and then devoting their resources to that, Rather than going to the time and the expense of actually rolling out that product, only to find nobody actually wants it and then retiring it, they can run this kind of experiment, and then they can see, actually, that didn't move the numbers. Let's focus our efforts elsewhere. Let's try and delight and surprise and motivate our users in an entirely different way. So like I say, experimentation lets us allocate resource where it will have the most impact. When you extrapolate this, especially as more and more interfaces become digital, I think the potential is huge. So if you go just down the road to the McDonald's on Holborn, they have the digital interfaces where you can order your food. What would happen if McDonald's applied this same kind of concept to the products that they sell or the upsells that they offer? It's a very easy way to pre-test demand for a product. And again, the validity of the data is crucial because people are voting with their mouse or their fingers or their propensity to pay for something. They don't know they're in an experiment. They're not sitting in a lab. They're not filling out a form. They're not having to rationalize or vocalize their feelings. So it gives us extremely valid, actionable, rapid data. That's the time. It's 1947. Sorry, I thought it was a countdown to 20 minutes. I was wondering why it was taking so long. And they told me I shouldn't have a beer before coming on. So finally, at the core of every experiment that we run at conversion.com is our experimentation framework. I have no idea how much time I have. But I'm pretty sure I don't have time to go into this. So the approach that we use when we're running an experiment is to fill out this kind of fill-in-the-blanks hypothesis framework. Like I said, I don't have the time to go into some of the terminology like, I think, lever is probably the one that will be most unfamiliar. But what we found is that the same experimentation framework or hypothesis framework that we use in A/B split tests will also apply to pretty much anything that we want to. So we can use this to optimize for price or when we're adding new functionality. We've been told by people at conferences that we've spoken at in the past that people are using this to optimize their SEO program even, and you can apply it offline as well, as we've seen. So if you do have any questions on this in terms of how you apply it, obviously do please get in touch. It's stephen@conversion.com. And finally, just to wrap up, we feel that testing and experimentation is what we consider to be an unfair advantage. It's a way that we can get additional data and insight into our customers. We can explore all of these choices that are available to us and decide how to invest our time and focus. Thank you.